Viral AI forecasts are dead wrong. You do not need to worry about autonomous terminators kicking in your front door. The mathematically probable threat vector downrange is an automated cyber-kinetic cascading failure. We are talking about hyperscaled AI malware, targeting our supervisory control and data acquisition systems, the SCADA networks. The crisis does not occur through physical destruction. It happens through algorithmic desynchronization. The grid goes down, and then the just-in-time logistics databases get autonomously corrupted. When that happens, your neighborhood is no longer a suburb. It becomes a cut-off forward operating base. And if you do not understand the physics to keep it alive, you fail. You are not here to satisfy some lone wolf prepper fantasy. Self-preservation will only keep you going for a few days. You learn this material so your child does not look at you with cracked lips, asking for a drink you do not have. Guilt is a stronger motivator than fear. We are going to strip away the tactical nonsense and look at the exact structural engineering, thermodynamics, and physical chemistry required to maintain continuity of operations. You are going to become the logistical safety net for your family when the math stops working for everyone else. Phase 1. The event. T0. The US power grid operates at a strict frequency of 60.0 Hz. Grid stability relies on synchronous mechanical inertia, the physical spinning of massive turbines. AI-driven malware targets the SCADA protocols, artificially manipulating the load balances. If the load exceeds generation, the frequency drops. A deviation to 59.5 Hz for more than 10 seconds triggers automatic under-frequency load-shedding relays. If this happens across multiple substations simultaneously, the grid's physical inertia is overwhelmed. Generators automatically trip offline to prevent their rotors from melting. The blackout cascades across the continent at the speed of light. At hour 1, everything feels deceptively normal. The lights are out, the fridge is humming down, but the air is quiet. People step out onto their porches, looking up and down the street. It feels like a standard summer storm outage. There is no gunfire, there are no sirens. This is the period of denial. You pull out your phone and you see that you still have a signal. But that signal is a trap, because you do not realize what is happening to the cellular infrastructure behind the scenes. Cell tower-based transceiver stations do not run on magic. When the grid drops, they fail over to valve-regulated lead-acid batteries. These battery banks are engineered strictly for 4 to 8 hours of runtime. Under normal circumstances, diesel backup generators would kick in, or utility crews would arrive. But in this scenario, AI-generated distress calls and automated deepfakes instantly flood the network. Millions of phantom calls saturate the bandwidth. This immediate overload draws maximum amperage from those batteries, draining them to their 10.5 volt cutoff in under 3 hours. Before the towers go completely dark, the first wave of panic hits. It is not driven by the blackout, but by the misinformation. Phones ring and people hear the synthesized voices of their spouses or children screaming for help. Automated social engineering triggers localized gridlock as thousands of people rush into the streets to rescue relatives who were never actually in danger. Traffic lights are dead. Intersections become immediate choke points. By hour 3, the roads are completely impassable. You are locked into whatever geographical location you happen to be standing in. At hour 4, the true danger of the event begins to materialize. Water distribution is highly vulnerable to algorithmic electrical failure. Municipal systems rely on gravity-fed water towers, which are replenished by electric high-lift pumps. A standard municipal water tower holds 500,000 gallons at an elevation of roughly 150 feet. In standard US units, every 2.31 feet of elevation provides 1 psi of pressure. But when grid power fails, those pumps halt completely. The clock on your local water supply instantly starts ticking. The average municipality designs those tower reserves to cover only 24 hours of average daily demand, or exactly one major fire flow event. When everyone in the city realizes the power is not coming back on, they will all simultaneously open their taps to fill their bathtubs. The mathematical drain rate skyrockets. Without human intervention to manually override pump stations with backup diesel generators, those towers will drain completely dry in 14 to 24 hours. The water pressure in your pipes is literally bleeding out, and the system has no way to clot. If you live in a multi-story urban environment, your timeline is even shorter. Standard municipal pressure can, theoretically, lift water 115 feet. But internal pipe friction, governed by the Hazen-Williams formula, limits adequate flow to roughly 40 to 50 feet. Buildings above 4 stories rely entirely on electric booster pumps. At T0, residents on the 5th floor and above lose running water instantly. They do not get 24 hours, they get nothing. If you are in a high-rise, you are essentially living in an arid vertical desert. This brings us back to why we are doing this. The first realization of the danger does not happen when you look out the window. It happens when you walk into the kitchen and see your kid trying to get a glass of water from the fridge dispenser. They push the lever and nothing happens. They look at you, confused. You try the sink tap. It coughs out a burst of brown air, spits a few drops, and goes dry. That is the moment the denial shatters. That is the moment you realize you are entirely on your own. While your taps are running dry, a quiet massacre begins at the regional hospitals. Advanced medical care relies on a massive, uninterrupted supply chain of electricity and logistics. Hospitals run their life support systems on diesel day tanks. These are designed to hold 72 hours of fuel, but AI corruption of routing databases has completely paralysed fuel tanker dispatch across the state. The diesel trucks are sitting idle because their algorithmic load sheets have been scrambled. The hospital administrators realise very quickly that their fuel is finite and there is no cavalry coming to top off their tanks. By the end of hour 4, the environment has fundamentally shifted. The cell networks are down, the water pressure is failing, the hospitals are running on a ticking clock, and the streets are jammed with paralysed vehicles and terrified people. The event phase is over. You are now entering the lockdown phase. The rules of survival shift from immediate reaction to long-term structural maintenance. You must transition your home into a forward operating base. If you rely on intuition from this point forward, you will make fatal errors. You have to rely strictly on the math. Hope is not a strategy. Most people guess they have enough food and water, but the math says otherwise. When the system drops, guessing gets people hurt. Go to protocolsurvival.com, calculate your household survival score, and enroll in our free Catastrophe Survival 101 course right now. Get the training before you need it. You need this knowledge downloaded into your brain before the cellular networks drain their batteries. protocolsurvival.com. Do it for the people who are going to be looking to you for answers. Phase 2. The Lockdown. Day 1 through 14. Forget grocery store shortages. The true threat is the rapid, non-linear degradation of the built environment and your biological support systems when automation ceases. Your first instinct is operational security. You lock the doors, seal the windows, and apply blackout curtains for light and sound camouflage against potential looters. Tactically, this makes sense, but biologically, you have just created a massive hazard. You have engineered an unvented microclimate that will turn lethal via atmospheric degradation long before the temperature outside drops. Let us look at the math. A standard master bedroom is roughly 800 cubic feet, or about 22,000 litres of air. Normal air contains 21% oxygen and 0.04% carbon dioxide. An average resting adult produces roughly 500 litres of carbon dioxide every 24 hours. If you hermetically seal that room, using plastic and tape for chemical defence or draft proofing, one adult adds roughly 2.2% carbon dioxide to the room's atmosphere per day. CO2 toxicity occurs long before hypoxia. Severe cognitive impairment and respiratory distress begin at 3% carbon dioxide. Unconsciousness occurs at 5 to 7%. If you have two adults and a child hiding in a sealed master bedroom, keeping quiet and staying out of sight, you will suffer hypercapnia in under 18 hours. The room will literally poison you. OPSEC cannot violate the laws of human respiration. You must establish passive thermal siphon convective ventilation. You cannot simply lock yourself in a box and wait for the problem to go away. Your biology will not allow it. If this grid collapse happens in the dead of winter, your problems compound. Attempting to heat an entire room without HVAC wastes massive amounts of thermal energy. You must reduce the volume and manage the thermal envelope. The blueprint is simple. Erect a smaller interior volume using reflective mylar as a radiant barrier and heavy polyethylene sheeting as a convective barrier. A standard two-person camping tent set up directly on top of a mattress inside a bedroom reduces your heating volume from 22,000 litres down to approximately 3,000 litres. You shrink the battle space. A human body at rest outputs roughly 100 watts of thermal energy. Two adults output 200 watts continuously. Using the basic heat transfer formula, where thermal output equals the insulation value times surface area times the temperature difference, those two human bodies in a sealed 3,000 litre space can raise the interior temperature by 15 to 20 degrees Fahrenheit above the surrounding room. But you must install a 2-inch diameter PVC pipe near the bottom for intake and one near the top for exhaust. This vents the carbon dioxide without losing all your thermal gains. Now we move to sanitation. When municipal lift stations fail, wastewater flows strictly by gravity. In a high-rise, the primary sewage stack relies on a clear exit to the municipal mains. If the main backs up, the sewage column fills the vertical pipe. Hydrostatic pressure of raw sewage is roughly 0.43 psi per vertical foot. A blockage at the ground floor of a 10-story building generates about 43 psi of raw sewage pressure, pushing violently against the check valves and P-traps of the lower floor apartments. The pipes cannot hold that pressure. First and second floor apartments will literally flood with the combined biomatter of every single floor above them. If you live on a lower floor in a grid-down urban environment, your bathrooms become immediate biological hazard zones. The smell alone will render the space uninhabitable. You cannot flush. You cannot use the drains. You must immediately sever your reliance on the building's plumbing infrastructure and implement strict waste management protocols. This is where most civilized people break. They cannot handle the reality of their own waste. You must transition to the twin bucket system. You separate urine from feces to dramatically reduce anaerobic bacterial decomposition and the resulting ammonia smell. Urine goes into one sealed bucket. Feces goes into another, immediately treated with sawdust, peat moss, or carbon-based material. You must achieve a carbon to nitrogen ratio of 30:1 for safe, odourless composting. If you do not manage this properly, cholera and dysentery will sweep through your household. You will survive the AI cyber attack, just to die from a medieval sanitation disease. Do the math. Manage your waste. When your stored water runs out, you will be forced to harvest surface water. Rivers, retention ponds, drainage ditches. Filtration alone is entirely insufficient against viral pathogens in highly turbid urban water. Chemical disinfection is mandatory. Do not rely on household bleach. Sodium hypochlorite has a shelf life of exactly 6 months before it degrades into useless salt water. You must use calcium hypochlorite. Pool shock. It requires a minimum of 68% available chlorine. It has a 10-year shelf life and is the absolute gold standard for field water purification when municipal systems collapse. To treat cloudy surface water, you require a 5 parts per million chlorine concentration to achieve a 4-log 99.99% viral kill rate over 30 minutes. First, make a stock solution. Dissolve 1 heaping teaspoon of 68% calcium hypochlorite into 2 gallons of water. This creates a 500 ppm solution. Then, add exactly 1 part stock solution to 100 parts raw filtered water, roughly 1.3 fluid ounces per gallon. Let it sit. If it does not smell faintly of chlorine after 30 minutes, dose it again. The lockdown phase is brutal on medical dependents. Patients requiring oxygen concentrators face a brutal power equation. A standard 5 litre per minute concentrator draws 350 watts continuously. That is 8.4 kilowatt hours every 24 days. A massive, expensive commercial battery bank will run this life support device for precisely 5.7 hours. Unless you possess a massive solar array and heavy lithium iron phosphate battery storage, respiratory dependence will begin failing by day 2. The power math is entirely unforgiving. You must stockpile compressed oxygen cylinders as a bridge. The AI disruption of just-in-time medical logistics also deletes the cold chain tracking data. During a summer grid-down scenario, indoor temperatures rapidly exceed 85 degrees Fahrenheit. Broad-spectrum antibiotics degrade rapidly. Reconstituted liquid antibiotics lose their potency within 72 hours above 25 degrees Celsius. Solid capsule efficacy drops exponentially if humidity exceeds 60%. If your child gets a cut that gets infected, the medicine you pull from your hot bathroom cabinet might only be functioning at 20% efficacy. You must store critical pharmaceuticals in a cool, dry, stable subterranean environment. We cannot ignore the threat of fire. Without water pressure and localized emergency dispatch, urban fires will burn until they exhaust their fuel load completely. Somebody 2 streets over is going to knock over a candle or mishandle a camp stove. In an unvented, modern apartment with sealed windows and heavy insulation, a residential fire transitions from the growth phase to full flashover in 3 to 5 minutes. Ceiling gas temperatures will quickly exceed 1100 degrees Fahrenheit. Without the fire department, a single mistake will burn down an entire city block. You must have fire extinguishers staged. People assume high-rises are safe because they are made of concrete and steel. They are fire-resistant, not fireproof. Prolonged, unsuppressed heat causes the ambient moisture trapped inside the structural concrete to boil. This explosive expansion is known as concrete spalling. It violently blows chunks of concrete off the structural rebar, exposing the steel to direct heat. The steel weakens and eventually induces localized structural collapse, even in so-called fireproof buildings. If a fire starts in a high-rise during a grid-down event, you evacuate immediately. Do not trust the building to survive the burn. By the end of day 14, the lockdown phase concludes. The weak have succumbed to dehydration, medical failure, or structural accidents. The panic has burned itself out, replaced by a deep, hollow silence. Your household has established its baseline logistics. You are managing waste, you are titrating water, you are controlling your microclimate. But your supplies are finite. You cannot stay barricaded forever. You have to step outside and assess the perimeter. You have to transition to the emergence phase. But before you step out that door, you need absolute assurance that your data is secure. When the grid goes dark, the cloud goes with it. You need a command center that works completely offline. I built Protocol Survival to be that system. It tracks your caloric inventory, your water reserves, and your equipment readiness without needing a cell signal. Secure your inventory and access your free training modules now while you still have a connection. Go to protocolsurvival.com and download the framework. Because when the AI drops the network, your digital memory gets wiped out. Make sure your survival manuals are stored locally. Phase 3, the Emergence, days 15 through 30. Discard the lone wolf prepper fantasy. Isolated individuals mathematically fail to survive high attrition scenarios. You need a community, but the complication in this specific AI scenario is trust. If an autonomous entity is weaponized to mimic voices and fake emergency broadcasts, electronic communication becomes a zero-trust environment. An AI entity sweeping the remaining RF networks can easily synthesize a family member's voice begging for rescue, luring you out of your secured position. Trust boundaries must shrink strictly to line of sight and physical analog verification. To counter AI deepfakes over handheld radios or remaining landlines, your mutual assistance group must establish physical, analog authentication protocols. You implement zero-knowledge proofs. This requires pre-established duress words to indicate coercion and authentication counters. If a relative manages to call and says a pre-arranged phrase, you must respond with a specific challenge word. If they do not provide the exact corresponding response immediately, you must assume the communication is a hostile AI deepfake. You cut the line. Do not argue with it. Do not give it data. You operate exclusively on authenticated analog trust. As you attempt to secure your perimeter, physics and biology will assert their constraints. Continuous operational security requires a 24/7 watch. Hollywood portrays a single guy with a rifle staying awake for a week. The US Army Research Institute of Environmental Medicine states that combat personnel require a minimum of 4.5 hours of uninterrupted core sleep per 24 hours to stave off severe cognitive degradation. Without it, you will experience hallucinations, loss of fine motor skills, and compromised decision-making. A single individual or a couple cannot maintain OPSEC beyond 96 hours without catastrophic biological failure. To maintain a 24-hour perimeter watch without physically destroying the guards, a strict mathematical minimum of 3 capable adults is required. The rotation is brutal but sustainable. 8 hours on watch, 8 hours working fatigue duty, and 8 hours sleeping. This is why the lone wolf dies. If you twist your ankle while chopping wood and you are alone, you are a casualty. If you have a 3-person element, the unit survives. Survival is a community-based supply chain issue. You must build your network now, because you cannot recruit strangers during a zero-trust collapse. Now you might think the National Guard would step in, that FEMA or local authorities will roll down your street with water buffaloes and diesel generators within 72 hours. It is a comforting thought. It is what happens during hurricanes. But it ignores the fundamental math of this specific scenario. The AI threat vector corrupts just-in-time logistics databases. It scrambles the routing protocols for the fuel tankers and the regional supply depots. The military runs on logistics. If the supply chains are digitally bricked, the trucks literally cannot roll out of the motor pool. The Guard cannot deploy effectively if their dispatch systems are throwing false coordinates and their transport trucks have zero diesel fuel. Automated cascading failure removes the state's ability to project physical aid. They will secure critical infrastructure, government nodes, and military bases. They will not have the bandwidth to bring bottled water to your specific subdivision. Do not build your survival plan around government intervention. The cavalry is not coming. In a cyber-kinetic grid-down scenario, you are the cavalry for your family. If you do not have the supplies, you do not get resupplied. As you scout your neighborhood, you must maintain strict EMCON, emission control. Do not emit unnecessary radio frequency. AI-driven autonomous drones or sophisticated looters using basic software-defined radios can easily detect Wi-Fi routers searching for connections, Bluetooth devices pinging, or unencrypted Baofeng radio transmissions. In a dark city, an RF signal shines like a flare in the night. It tells everyone exactly where you are, and more importantly, it tells them you have power. Having power means you have supplies. You must reduce your electromagnetic signature to absolute zero until it is mathematically necessary to communicate. Phase 4. The Long Haul. Day 31 to 100. By month 2, the environment stabilizes into a state of brutal, grinding scarcity. You must utilize Faraday cages to protect and store your critical electronics. Galvanized steel trash cans lined with thick cardboard insulation will isolate your devices from ambient surveillance and protect against potential localized EMP follow-on attacks. Your electronics render you invisible to RF sweeping when stored properly. This phase is not about firefights. It is about caloric math, slow starvation, and avoiding fatal deficiencies. You are fighting human biology, not just the elements. A catastrophic supply chain failure requires mathematical rationing. You cannot simply eat canned soup until it runs out. Your diet must prevent basal metabolic rate decay. We use the Harris-Benedict formula. An average adult male requires roughly 1,800 kilocalories a day just to maintain basic organ function while resting. But to conduct active physical labor and security patrols, that requirement spikes to 2,800 calories a day. If you are consuming 1,500 calories while burning 3,000, your body will begin cannibalizing its own muscle tissue within a week. You lose strength rapidly. You must stockpile by strict macro ratios: 50% carbohydrate, 35% fat, and 15% protein by calorie. Fat is the most critical and dense form of stored energy, providing 9 kilocalories per gram, compared to just 4 for carbs and protein. Lean meats are insufficient. You need fat. Stockpile ghee, which is clarified butter, and coconut oil. These fats have less than 0.1% moisture content and incredibly stable molecular structures. They provide a 2-year shelf life without refrigeration. Fat will keep you warm, and it will keep your brain functioning. Calories alone will not save you if you fail the micronutrient math. Vitamin C is required to prevent scurvy. You need a minimum of 10 milligrams a day. Without it, your connective tissues break down, old wounds reopen, and you will bleed internally. You do not need expensive freeze-dried fruit. Stockpile synthetic ascorbic acid powder. 1 kilogram costs roughly $20 and provides 100,000 days of preventative doses for a single person. It is cheap, stable, and mathematically perfect for long-term continuity of operations. You titrate it into your purified water, and you survive. Next is vitamin B1, thiamine, to prevent beriberi. You need a minimum of 1.2 milligrams a day. If you stockpile mountains of white rice, you have a problem. White rice has the bran removed to give it an indefinite shelf life, which strips away the thiamine. A diet consisting strictly of white rice will cause fatal cardiovascular beriberi in 60 to 90 days. Your heart will literally fail while your stomach is full. You must stockpile dried beans, lentils, or multivitamin supplements to offset the polished grain deficiencies. The math of your diet must be absolute. As the months drag on, the sociological landscape shifts. The Disaster Research Center at the University of Delaware has proven through decades of data that elite panic is largely a myth. Communities default to pro-social, highly organized cooperative behavior during physical disasters. People want to help each other, but the AI threat vector corrupts this natural instinct. The deepfakes, the spoofed radios, the constant paranoia of algorithmic deception forces people to remain isolated. The technology prevents the natural human tendency to form large survival communities. You will be dealing with small, heavily armed, highly suspicious enclaves of survivors. In this environment, operational security is not about looking intimidating. It is about looking like a zero-value asset. In military logistics, this is reducing your physical signature. Camouflaged vulnerability. If your house has boarded up windows with gun ports and razor wire, you look like a compound hoarding supplies. You attract attention. You want your property to look exactly like the abandoned, looted house next door. Do not fortify the exterior in a way that screams you have wealth. Fortify the interior fatal funnels. Keep the outside looking desolate. Make them think someone already stripped the location bare. This extends to your waste management and cooking. A house that smells like cooked bacon and has zero trash accumulated on the curb is an obvious target in a starvation environment. Odor travels. Cook during high winds or rainstorms to dissipate the scent. Never cook heavily spiced foods. Trash discipline is critical. MRE wrappers, empty tin cans, and fuel canisters should be covertly stored internally, never placed in outdoor bins. If a scouting party walks past your house and sees a freshly opened can of beef stew in the trash, your camouflaged vulnerability is immediately compromised. This is what the long haul actually looks like. It is not an action movie. It is waking up tired, checking the security perimeter, calculating your macronutrients, managing the twin bucket system, and remaining utterly silent. It is a grueling mathematical grind. You measure your water down to the milliliter. You calibrate your sleep schedule to ensure someone is always on watch. You do the unglamorous, dirty work of keeping human bodies alive in a dead zone. You do it every single day, without fail, because the moment you stop doing the math, the environment reclaims you. We circle back to why we bother learning this. It is tedious, it is uncomfortable, but you learn the titration formulas, the fluid mechanics, and the caloric ratios because someone under your roof is relying on you. When the automated systems fail and the world goes dark, you become the infrastructure. You become the water treatment plant. You become the power grid. You become the shield. And you cannot protect them with tactical gear alone. You protect them with knowledge. You protect them by refusing to let a preventable math error dictate the survival of your family. Do not wait for the SCADA networks to desynchronize before you start taking this seriously. Download the app, calculate your scores, and study the physical chemistry. Prepare your forward operating base while the hardware still works. Because the truth is, the electrical grid is not what keeps the lights on, it is what keeps the monsters out. Stay sharp. Stay downrange. Out here.